Hello, welcome back to Parachute Minds. My name is Jeremiah Sanchez, aka Maya, the author of the Parachute Minds series, Leap of Fate, and soon to be released within about a month, Light Switch. And I am so excited. In that time, though, I was trying to think of what kind of content I could be putting out on YouTube, and something came to me. My computer is currently filled with lots of short stories, primarily horror, that are all collecting digital dust. I'm not doing anything with them. So, I dabble in voice acting. I love telling stories, obviously, but I love actually telling stories. I want to tell these stories to you. I'll probably just black out the screen. You'll close your eyes, kick back, relax, get lost in it, and just listen to the story. Okay, so first things first, I need to figure out what the proper narration voice is, because I do a lot of voices, but I've never tried doing just a pure narrator voice. Brittany's dream lingered in the darkness as she awoke from a deep sleep. Okay, so that's just my normal kind of reading voice. Now, let's run through a few different voices. The first one, which is kind of the low-hanging fruit for me, is the epic movie man voice. So, Brittany's dream lingered in the darkness as she awoke from a deep sleep. Not bad. However, it kind of feels a bit too epic sounding, so it won't really capture the fear. This summer, you too can see whether or not she survives. Kind of sounds a bit like Optimus Prime as well. Autobots, pull out! Brittany's dream lingered in the darkness as she awoke from a deep sleep. It turned out that, much to her surprise, things do, in fact, go bump in the night. We could go the complete other direction. I happen to do a decent Elmo, which makes most people uncomfortable.
Brittany's dreams lingered in the dark as she awoke from a deep sleep.
Terrible. It would give me nightmares. It would be scary, but more so off-putting than the actual story itself. And we're here for the writing. I'm here for the writing.
Brittany's dreams lingered in the dark as she awoke from deep sleep. Brittany's dreams lingered in the darkness as she awoke from a deep sleep. What you gonna do?
From a deep sleep. Yuck. Brittany's dreams lingered in the dark as she awoke from a deep sleep. Oh boy. All of those are indeed terrible, I know. So I think I'll probably just resort to my natural reading voice and just try to insert as much inflection, nuance, and emotion into the story to try to capture the feeling more than anything else. So, if you wouldn't mind suspending your belief, there's this fly. This fly is so attracted to me because I'm the shit. I'll try to kill that thing and then get back to this. Anyways, suspend your disbelief, suspend your belief, whatever the proper term is. Lay down, close your eyes, and surrender to the darkness. Brittany's dreams lingered in the darkness as she awoke from a deep sleep. It took a few seconds for her senses to recognize the familiarities of her own bed. The thick comforter was up and over her nakedness, wrapped around her body like a snug cocoon. Only her feet were sticking out of the bottom of the blanket. Cool air brushed over her face as the oscillating fan provided ambient white noise. She could feel the weight of her full-grown German shepherd, Clark, lying on her legs. Her subtle movements roused him enough to lick her toes as a gentle reminder that he was there, her protector and best friend. He felt heavier than normal, probably from her giving him an extra scoop at dinner. After all, she just moved into a new house, just Clark and her. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Brittany's eyes slowly opened as she fought the urge to go back to sleep. The room was pitch black. Her tired eyelids flickered as she turned her head to look at the clock on her desk. The blurry red numbers took a few seconds to focus. It was 2:17 a.m. She'd been asleep for maybe 5 hours. She didn't remember exactly when she drifted off, but it only took a few moments of mindless thinking to trail back toward dreamland. Creak! There it was again. That's what had woken her. She'd forgotten about it in the lulling blur of the waking world. The groan sounded like it came from the basement, and it was loud enough to rouse her. Creak! She jerked up in bed. The sudden jolt made Clark climb down off her and walk out of the bedroom into the hallway. She watched her big dog's silhouette disappear into the house, his clawed feet clecking against the floor. She felt safer just knowing he was there with her. If someone was in the house, he would have erupted in a frenzy of deep barks. But the sound still put her on edge. Brittany swallowed her uneasiness as her pulse motivated her to feel around the floor for the dirty t-shirt she'd tossed there before bed. Her trembling fingers found it as another loud creaking sound made her throat tighten. She sped to the light switch across the room, every second instilling new fears in the blackness. Her frantic hands finally found the switch and flicked it on. Light flooded the room, exposing nothing sinister. She logically reminded herself that it was just an old house with floors and pipes that she was unfamiliar with. Her hand went over her chest as she tried to slow her heart, chuckling at herself. There was nothing to be afraid of. But living alone came with expected fears and jumps. It's something she wouldn't have done without Clark. As soon as her shirt was on, she sighed and walked out towards the kitchen, knowing a glass of water would help her mind focus on normalcy. Plus, the peanut butter Oreos she'd bought the previous day would make for a great midnight snack. She shook off her nerves and slowed her pulse as she flicked on every light along the way. In the middle of the hallway, she paused. The old house had a pull string attached to the attic stairs tucked away in the ceiling. In the exhausting chaos of moving, Brittany hadn't taken the time to pull it down and see how spacious the attic was, but she was eager to use its storage space for all the stuff she was too fond of to throw away. What gave Brittany pause was that the stairs were down. She stayed back a few feet, studying them. She hadn't pulled the string, and she knew Clark was incapable. A handful of childlike nightmares tore at her imagination as she stared up at the blackness of the attic. All thoughts of intruders or monsters were instantly reasoned away as she reminded herself that any unwelcome guests would have set off Clark's machine gun barking. He was always quick to threaten anyone that wasn't her, even her friends that he'd met many times before. It's just how he said hello or warned her of visitors. Brittany rolled her eyes, assuming the ladder was likely faulty and it would just be another thing added to the list of old house problems she'd have to fix. She summoned the courage to walk over and push the stairs back up into the ceiling with an exaggerated karate sound. She laughed at herself, shook her head, and continued to the kitchen. The last of her jitters disappeared as the regularity of filling a glass cup with water from her new fridge's dispenser brought her imagined fears back to reality. She took a deep breath and blew it through loosening lips before giggling at herself again. Well, that was stupid. She smiled at the water in her hand. Good thing the roommate search begins tomorrow. No more scaredy cat Brit jumping at every sound in the new house at night, eh, Clark? As she brought the glass to her lips and drank it back, she looked around. Clark wasn't in the kitchen with her. Clark? Her tender voice grew sharp as she heard no doggy footsteps in response. Normally, he'd whine with excitement and come running to her side, most often met with a treat of some sort. She waited a few more seconds as the responding silence became unsettling. Clark! Come here, buddy! She knew she'd locked every door and window before getting ready for bed. She wasn't a very trusting person, and she didn't like leaving any vulnerabilities to plague her imagination. Sleep was her favorite and deserved no interruptions. Her voice grew stern and loud as she put the water down and grabbed a box of cereal. Clark! Get your ass in here! She shook the cereal box, knowing it was a sure way to summon him whenever he was being difficult. After more silence, her pulse throbbed behind her eyes. She grunted out a breath, trying to psych herself up. A few reasonable scenarios ran through her mind as to what Clark could be doing or why he wasn't answering. Maybe he was hurt, but she couldn't imagine how. She hadn't heard anything crash or fall. Maybe he was just being stubborn, but that wasn't like him. He always came to her call, especially when she raised her voice at him. One of the reasons she loved dogs was their innate sensitivity to energy. He always knew when to comfort her, or when to just leave her alone during one of her angry fits. Creak! There it was again. Her eyes peeled open. She spun, tossing the box of cereal onto the counter and grabbing the chef's knife from her knife holder. After some deep breaths, she strode out of the kitchen to the top of the staircase that led down to the basement. She stared into the darkness at the bottom and shook her head. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was a nice basement, recently refinished, with nothing eerie about it. She flicked on the switch at the top of the staircase, illuminating the hardwood stairs. Her gut was still in knots. She was worried about Clark. Whatever was creaking hadn't been there during the last few days of moving in. At least, she didn't remember it. She scoped her surroundings one last time, hoping to see her dog somewhere, anywhere. It would make her feel infinitely better just knowing where he was and what he was doing. She could ignore a creaking house, but only if her protector was there to sleep on her legs. Clark wasn't anywhere to be seen. Brittany took a deep breath and started walking down the stairs with the knife tightly gripped in her hand. As she reached halfway down the stairs, another shrill creak echoed through the house. It was getting louder as she got closer to the basement. Her palm was sweating around the knife's handle, and her eyes were glued to the light switch at the bottom of the stairs. She was ready to run down to it, flick it on, and see what was making the noise, but her feet were moving at a snail's pace. Each step sent her heart farther up into her throat. Creak! That was it! She'd had it! She ran down the last few stairs and internally screamed as the light flicked on. The finished basement instantly became visible as the lights came on like normal. The simple reassurance brought her pulse down a little. She hung her head for a moment, trying to catch her breath. God, I hate basements, she muttered. She stepped through the doorway and froze as she saw deep red stains splattered across the room. Dark crimson coated the carpet. It was sprayed up the walls and spattered about the ceiling. The stench of blood was instantly palpable. Brittany's jaw hung open as her stomach churned. Her petrified eyes looked around at the bookshelf, couch, and random boxes she hadn't yet unpacked. They were covered in blood spray. Brittany's entire body trembled. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream or run. She was stunned, revulsed, confused. Brittany screamed and pointed her knife. The sound had come from an old heating pipe running up the wall behind her couch. Her breathing quickened as she looked closer and saw brown hair mixed into some blood smeared on the pipe. She immediately recognized the length and color. It was Clark's hair. Her fear was unshakable, but so was her love for her dog. She held the knife out at arm's length as she stepped forward and peered over the back of the couch. Brittany's blood ran cold as she saw her dog's body stacked against the pipe. Creak! Clark! She ran to him, her eyes darting around as her bare feet splashed through the cold, wet carpet. It didn't matter. Keeping the knife tightly gripped by her side, she knelt by Clark's body. His fur was matted and soaked, and there were too many gashes and cuts for Brittany to count through tear-filled eyes. She rapidly blinked as she tried to understand what was happening. She was in shock. She wanted to cry, but her breath wasn't there. The entire room was shrinking as her face shook. She reached her hand out and placed it on Clark's belly. The messy hair parted through her fingers as she prayed, checking for a pulse. But there was none. Anguish set in, twisting Brittany's stomach to nausea. Her own saliva tasted like bitter poison pooling in her mouth. She was about to burst into tears when she realized something. Clark's body was cold. His coat, his skin, and the blood, it was all cold. She checked over her shoulder and then looked back at her dog's body as she felt around. Every part of him was cold. He'd been dead for hours. She froze in place. What was lying on my legs? She jumped as her peripherals caught the staircase light shut off. Her body violently shook as she held the knife out toward the doorway. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she heard claws clicking down the wood stairs. Something was right outside the doorway. "Who's there?" Brittany yelled, her voice cracking as she squeezed the knife. A pale hand with gnarled knuckles and long clawed fingers reached around and flicked off the light. Hey, welcome back. Wasn't that fun? Some nice juxtaposing energy against the spooky story. Well, it was fun for me. It at least put the first 2 letters in fun. It put the FU in fun. Copyright. No, hopefully you had a good time listening to that story. Hopefully you found it at least a little eerie, creepy, maybe scary. Who knows? That's all going to be personal. It was enjoyable for me. It was definitely a challenge because I spend so much time writing long novels that I don't normally get to hear them out loud. So it's cool to try to put some emotion behind the words. If you liked that, let me know in the comments so that I will continue making them. I have a bunch of short stories, like I said, just collecting digital dust on my computer. And this is a fun outlet for them. They have a place to live now. So yeah, let me know. And obviously if you enjoyed it at all, then subscribe to the channel, or else something creepy will wake you up in the middle of the night with some loud creaks and then, lay on your legs. I look forward to doing this again. That was pretty fun for me. So have a good day, and as always, may death not find you sleeping.